this morning's discussion about transition streets. We have some goals for this session. Goal 1 is to obtain a basic understanding of the Transition Streets program. Goal 2 here, helpful suggestions about how to implement a Transition Streets program in your neighborhood. In Goal 3, we're going to work through a section of the Transition Streets workbook. And then our 4th goal is that you know how to obtain further information, resources, and materials about transition streets. And you're probably asking, what is transition streets? And we're going to get to it. Who we are. I'm Mark Judeman. I'm on the Arrow board, and I'm also on the Transition US board. The Transition US is the country hub for the transition movement in the United States. And again, you'll talk about that a little bit more in a second too. Also, we have Dodie Anderson, who's from Missoula. She is the Transition Missoula lead, as well as being on the Arrow board. Dodie has implemented Transition Streets in Missoula. She wasn't involved in the pilot, but Transition Streets was piloted in 10 communities across the U.S. Just 3 or 4 years ago now, I think. Yeah, and it was both Missoula and Bozeman were pilot communities for Transition Streets, so there's quite a presence here in Montana. So what is transition? Transition movement is comprised of vibrant grassroots community initiatives that seek to build community resilience in the face of such challenges as peak oil, climate change, and economic crises. Just editorially, the transition movement started around 2005, 2006, when peak oil was the major concern, before climate change was as important or as imperative as it is now. So peak oil is probably less of a focus. Climate is more of a focus. And then the economic crises results from passing through the 2008 Great Recession. Transition initiatives differentiate themselves from other sustainability and environmental groups by seeking to mitigate those converging global crises by engaging their communities in homegrown, citizen-led education, action, and multi-stakeholder planning to increase local resilience, reliance, and resilience. We regeneratively use our local assets, innovating, networking, collaborating, replicating proven strategies, and respecting the deep patterns of nature and diverse cultures in their place. We work with deliberation and good cheer to create a fulfilling and inspiring local way of life that can withstand the shocks of rapidly shifting global systems. And then what is Transition Streets? What you're all here for. It's a community-based project to help individual households save energy and water right here and right now. Transition Streets participants meet with their neighbors for 7 sessions over a period of several months to build a sense of community in their neighborhood and learn fun and easy ways to practice sustainable habits. You should participate. Anyone who's looking to learn fun and easy earth-friendly habits, save money on their energy and water bills, and build a sense of community by regularly meeting up with neighbors. This originated in the United Kingdom in a small town called Totnes, and they did a lot of measurement after they implemented Transition Streets to see how well it worked, and they came up with numbers like how many tons of CO2 people saved, how many pounds they saved in money from implementing these, and those were all large numbers. But the number one thing that people talked about was how they learned more and connected with their neighbors that they hadn't met before, and how they had an increased sense of community afterwards. And I'm sure Dodie might have some comments about that. I know that when it was implemented in Helena, people had the same comment. That, I think one of the comments I heard was that people would be walking down the street and somebody would be waving at them that they had never waved at them before. So it really does help. And where to find the Transition Streets materials at transitionstreets.org. There's an introduction to Transition Streets, there's an outreach guide, Transition Streets workbook, download, facilitator's guide, and much more.
Mark, a question on that is, so these, sounds like these pilot projects, and I'm sure you'll get into them, have been in place for a few years now. Is there anything on the transition streets about the results of the pilot projects?
Well, actually, the program is now in operation.
Yeah.
So there is a pilot going on right now, but it's for a different version for renters. And so it's called Transition Streets on a Budget. But the Transition Streets workbook is actually implemented. It's not piloted anymore.
So are there results from the pilots? From the pilots though?
Yeah.
Well, I think those were incorporated in revisions to the materials.
The most recent version is the 2019 version of Transition Streets that came out this year.
And maybe this is a good time to hand out some of these materials. Actually, let's start with the outreach guide. Just have
I can
15
say a
copies.
couple things.
Okay.
So
Why don't you pass the program that way?
we're implementing it in Missoula, the first thing we do is reach out to people in neighborhoods. We table at different events where there would be community members, and we have an outreach guide, or we have some type of way of reaching out to them and letting them know a bit about the program. This board that you see standing up there is one of the things that we use. And it has some quotes from groups that have now done it and their reaction to it, and some pictures of the people. So outreach is like step one of getting this into your community.
Yeah, so you have the outreach guide in front of you now. Again, it tells you what Transition Streets is, suggests who should participate, and then how do I get started? So there's a website, there's stories from Transition Streets teleseminar to get a basic understanding of the project. Then you want to make a list of people to make your friends or individuals in your neighborhood or community who might be interested in participating. If you're having trouble getting at least 6 people, which is kind of necessary, sorry, at least 6 people, which is kind of necessary to have a critical mass, then there's some suggestions on how to do that in the next page. And then write down a list of reasons that you want to participate in the program, why it's important to you. And so when you invite people to join your group, then you'll have those ideas. Okay.
Yeah, in Missoula, Transition Missoula has this little piece of material, and we encourage people to go to their neighbors, and it tells a bit about Transition Streets, and they can put their own information back here so that they actually can go door to door in areas where they think they would like to have neighbors come together, and they have a little thing to give to their neighbors while they're talking about it. So this is one thing we came up with in Missoula.
So again, there's more suggestions on how to get people involved, how to find neighbors. They're suggesting that you have at least 8 from 6 different households involved. Did you have any trouble getting that many in Missoula?
Some of the groups came together, they had too many actually. They thought
sorry.
more than 8, but some of the groups were just right, and then some are really small. It's not a definite thing. Like there could be 3 or 4 ladies who decided we want to meet in the morning and do it together, and that works too. You can do it in different sizes. But the one group that's there was, I think, more than 8, and they felt that didn't give enough time for people to give input and discuss and have their own time to talk. So it's not a big group kind of thing you're trying to bring together.
Kathy, do you recall how many people were in?
I don't remember how many people participated in the Helena group, but I do want to reinforce what Dodie said, which is that for the Helena group, the organizer there went house to house to deliver the invitation personally, and that really cultivated a sense of and personally inviting people into the Transition Streets conversation.
Okay. There's also some suggestions for engaging media outreach, how to engage them, some There's links for sample Transition Streets media coverage, resources for creating a local media list. You may find all this useful not only for Transition Streets, but whatever your local projects and programs might be. And then finally, a press release template on the back as well. So hopefully you will find all those resources very useful. And again, that's available as a download on www.transitionstreets.org. And then there's the workbook. As you see, there are 7 chapters. Getting started, very important. Gives you a lot of great tips for how to organize and so on. Energy is a chapter. Water is a chapter. Food is a chapter. Waste, transportation, and finally, chapter 7 is what's next. So, and lest you think that you're just kind of going into it cold with just the Transition Streets chapters, the workbook itself, there's also a facilitator's guide that covers each chapter.
And one nice thing, the way this is set up, there doesn't have to be one person that's a facilitator all the time. So the facilitator guide is set up so that any of the neighbors that decide, okay, I'll cover this chapter, I'll facilitate this time when we come together, they can take the guide and be prepared so that you can share the leadership, so to speak, of the discussions in the group.
Thank you. So these, as I mentioned, these are all available for download on that website, transitionstreets.org. There is a small charge. I think it's $20.
If you have a transition initiative, like we transition Missoula, then it's free. I can download it, and then I can have it printed, or I can email it to the person that's going to be in the group, and they can do it on their laptop or their iPad or something if they don't want the printed copy. So it's possible to do it a couple different ways. And if you have a transition initiative, is what they call it, in your town, like we have Transition Missoula, then it's free to everybody. But once you've downloaded it you decided you're going to do it just within your town, then you can share that download with the other people in the group too. It's not $20 a person. We do, when we print it out, just a when we print it out, we do it black and white because it's cheaper, and so we can pretty much give them a copy for free because we participated in Missoula Gives, and we have funds to be able to do that. And then people donate used notebooks, or they bring their own notebook. So it's can be very cost effective. And we just did ours all in black and white because it was cheaper, except we found that there is an evaluation guide at the beginning and one that you do at the end. And it's color-coded, so you know which is beginning and end. So we print those couple of pages out in color. Otherwise, we save a little money by doing it all black and white.
And you rotated the responsibility for each of the meetings? Is that how you set it up?
It depends on the group, yeah.
Okay.
We did have, sometimes I did a couple, like the group I worked with, and then somebody said, oh, I want to do the food, and so we did trade off who facilitated. And that was fun.
Cool. All right. So I thought maybe we just walk through the Transition Streets food chapter just to kind of give you a feel for what one of these chapters looks like. I think I get the impression that they're really consistent between chapters. They, similar look and feel. So if you look at this food section, you kind of get a feel for what energy or waste or water might look like as well. So on the first page, 4.1, food, it's just kind of an overview of how important local food is, impacts of industrialization of the food system, why investing in your local food system has multiple benefits, and also a bit of realism that if you can't grow everything locally. Bananas, as they use as an example, you're not going to, unless you have one of John Brown's geothermally heated greenhouses, where you might have a banana tree, then you might not have local bananas. But you can certainly move that way. Go ahead.
And you do this ahead of time before you meet. So you've gone through this chapter before the group comes together, and there's places where you've filled in your answers and thought about things. And the strength of it is that while you're going through this as a group of neighbors, now you're sharing ideas and resources and the kinds of things within your area that would help people fulfill some of their going local and saving money goals.
How often did you meet?
We met about every couple of weeks.
Every couple of weeks. Okay.
But if you get too far apart, you lose the continuity, but sometimes too close together, particularly like the water and the energy, there's a lot of kind of research you have to do of your home. So doing it like the next week kind of makes it hard on people who are busy, and that type of thing. So and each time we set up a couple weeks or a couple meetings ahead. Sometimes they recommend at the start, just decide every single day. But with the group I was working with this last time, they decided, well, we'll just figure out a couple meetings ahead. And we were a little flexible because we were a small group and we could change if we had to. But again, it's not set in stone. The group decides how and when and where.
I believe in Helena they were doing it every 2 weeks as well. Did you have any, so clearly, I know what the material is, but I've never actually implemented it. So Dodie is a wonderful resource for actual implementation. Did you have issues with managing the folks who were in the discussion to keep them on track, or did
Well, it was good to have a system where everybody who spoke, like if you wanted to do the hold the little item kind of thing, so that people, when it was their turn to talked. If you have a smaller group, it becomes more of a conversation. But if you have a group, like they recommend, 6 to 8, then it may be good to be able to say, okay, this person's speaking now, and this person, the rest of us are listening, so the discussion doesn't become chaotic. And many times also have a secretary, somebody who's writing down the ideas, and then that goes to the whole group at the end of the meeting or within the next week. Some people did it electronically. They took the notes on their laptop and then emailed them to everybody. Or it was more like taking down the suggestions that people had and the type of things that were answering the different questions.
I have just some basic questions, Dodie. Where did this come from? What, who is this group? And yeah.
Well, Transition Network is a worldwide global network that started, like you said, in Totnes, England.
Okay, and who funds it? And
donations. They're a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Transition US has come from that. And so they're the ones that developed the US version of Transition Streets. So that's what you're seeing.
And so it's more of a network than...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's not, it's not like chapters or something like
that.
that.
Okay, yeah.
Each of the individual initiatives are relatively independent. There is a process for becoming an official initiative, but there's no expectation, that funds are going to go to Transition US or to the transition movement. It's all grants and donations.
And where did the materials come from? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so this is the project of Transition US, the country hub in the United States. They took the original, as Dodie said, the original materials from Totnes and adapted it. They had a committee of folks who volunteered their time to write materials that were, using the original materials as a guide, but more specific to the U.S. and our, how things are done here.
Okay.
And there were several periods of revision and so on. That's what the pilot was for, to make sure that it all worked okay.
Okay.
And then there were some revisions as a result of that.
And Dodie, how did you get involved?
Someone asked me to be involved in Transition Missoula.
Oh, someone in Missoula?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in fact, Claudia Brown was we call us coordinators of we're the leader of, we're the coordinator of.
Okay.
So she was part of the pilot program that they did on transition streets, and she led the group in Missoula that was doing the pilot program.
Okay.
And then later on, she asked me to come to be involved, and then I progressed into being the coordinator.
So you don't necessarily have to have a transition initiative to do this. Helen does not. So these materials are available for anyone to get them. When there is an official initiative or even a non-official initiative, there are a number of ways those are set up. Most of them are all volunteer, and there's no fees or membership cost or anything like that. They're not a 501c3, they're just a local organization. When we started Transition Houston, that's the way that we were. Some will actually go to the point of having maybe a fiscal sponsor. There are some like Media Pennsylvania, for instance, they are 501c3 and they have a number of enterprises that they run, and so they've got funds that are generated from those. It's all very flexible.
And Transition Missoula is a 501c3 under the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center. And so we are one of the branches of that. So then we are classified under their 501c3 status. So that allows us to do some of the things that nonprofit, to be involved in Missoula Gives and those type of things.
Have you heard of any initiatives or transition streets initiatives collaborating with or partnering with the city itself?
Yeah. Tony had some experience with that.
Right, in fact, we're just beginning with that. I'll stand up. So we have connected with, what they have in Missoula is called the neighborhood councils, where different areas are in councils that advise the city. And there is a coordinator of the neighborhood councils, so I'm working with her to be able to get this type of presentation at a neighborhood council meeting. And then if there was people within that neighborhood council that wanted to start transition streets groups, then I would work with them, and help them get started in it. So that kind of the way that we've connected with the city.
There are some I think, especially in California, some of the transition initiatives that work directly with the municipalities, and it's been a program that the city has offered. So there's been funding for printing things out and access to their media channels for getting the word out and so on. In Helena, the person that took the lead on doing transition streets kind of as a pilot is part of the Conservation Advisory Board for the city of Helena, which is working on Helena's climate change plan. And this is something that she wanted to do as a pilot in her neighborhood, with the idea that then it would be presented to the city as a project that the city could do. And then hopefully they would roll it out in more communities. But I think that's a really good idea.
So sort of a question along the same lines, like in Missoula, Climate Smart Missoula, what's the relationship between Transitions Missoula and Climate Smart Missoula?
We've given them the materials. Like Amy Sillenberg has the materials, and some of she may be gathering ideas from it, but we're not working through them to get the word out about. But we have been partnering with, in fact, the board that you see, many times we tabled at different meetings for different nonprofit or other groups that are interested in this type of thing. And we invited them to some of our meetings. And like one of the things we did, I don't know if you've heard of the movie Tomorrow. We showed that at a local theater, and then we invited other groups to table, and we tabled in the lobby. So just connecting. There's a lot of groups in Missoula that really fit in with the ideas and concepts of the transition movement. So let's partner. So, and we have a Facebook page, and I mostly do that, and it showcases a lot of what's going on in Missoula that fits into the ideology of local and community activities and that type of thing.
And if you're interested, I guess I should say, in Transition US, kind of like the broader range of what we do, you can go to transitionus.org. And if you want to see what's going on worldwide, transitionnetwork.org. Yeah, this is a good time to also talk about other programs that Transition US is working on that are kind of similar to Transition Streets. Dodie, I think you mentioned that.
I mentioned the one.
Yeah, the transition on a budget, transition streets on a budget, which is kind of an adaptation of the same materials, but for people who are renters or
students even.
Yeah.
Some of these things are, you're looking at your energy use in your house and you can make a difference. But if you're a renter, then how would you approach that? How would you maybe cut down on the electric bill that you have to pay and that you want to be more environmentally friendly? And so that is being piloted right now. And the other program that they're working on is called Ready Together, and it's more of an emergency preparedness type of focus. And we found here in Missoula that several of the groups, when they were done, wanted to go on and do something else. And one of the areas that they seem to be interested in is how can we work together to be safer and more resilient, and emergency preparedness type of thing would be the next step. So that's still in the process of being written, but we're looking forward to those two coming out.
So, can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
So it sounds, which I didn't appreciate at the beginning, is it sounds like these gatherings and collaborations have an arc. It's like you come together to get an understanding of and help assessment and support making changes in your home level, and then when that's complete, like this is not continue forever, is that?
Right.
Yeah.
There's 7 meetings in the workbook.
I see.
And the last one is, so what's next?
I see.
So again, that's up to the group.
I see.
Some of them started things like tool sharing among the neighbors or, but
see.
many of them wanted to go on with something that was like this booklet. And so that's in the works.
Okay, so then my second question, I'll be done, is when you talk about partnering and that type of vision, have you done things like a table at a farmer's market, and if so, do you find that an effective way of communicating, or is one-on-one better?
Well, we've done tabling, yeah.
Yes.
And showcased the materials, and people have signed up that they're interested in trying to get one started in their neighborhood. And then I've met with people that want to do that, and I've given them this. And my information is here, but I just tell them, put a sticker over it. And then I start training them a little bit more about how to do it, and then they go to their neighbors and invite them.
Right. And then, so just my last, is one of your tabling events been a farmer's market? Is that?
No.
Okay.
It's mostly in other groups that,
Got it. Thank
that
you.
we've done. I guess we could do farmers market, but we just haven't.
I think some of my skeptical questions were based on the fact that I have seen Facebook type groups in Missoula that portray themselves as like neighborhood security groups, but actually, it's kind of like they're collecting information and a certain sense of paranoia.
Yeah.
It gets creepy after. You're like,
Is that through the neighborhood council? Or?
no, it's not through the neighborhood council. They're just
okay.
like these, I think they have political leanings, but it's like this happened in our neighborhood, and I saw
Kind
this
of the
car
neighborhood
sort of
watch,
thing.
or-
Yeah, sort of like a
Right.
neighborhood watch. But
Yeah.
anyway, so
This is
this
not that.
sounds very
Yeah.
And with the first chapter that you start on, you do share information with the rest of the people in your group. So you've come together, you've decided you want to do this. In fact, at the first meeting, you can decide, no, I don't want to do this, and not do it. But if you decide, okay, I want to do it, then there's lines in the first chapter where you can write down people's contact information so you can communicate with the neighbors that are going to do it with you. And then you set up a couple, or maybe the whole schedule of when you're going to meet. You pick a name for your group, like you'll see up here, there's the Dandelions or something street group, so it's to build a bit of cohesion and to set some rules as to how you're going to operate, and that's all decided on by the group.
Kathy participated, I think, in some of the follow-up activities that transition, or that the Helena group pilot.
I did, and I think that they were so thrilled with this idea that there were longtime neighbors that really had not known one another. You know how you can live on a street and you've got kids' activities and you kind of wave at people and you don't really know their names, you kind of wave at them. And this provided kind of an excuse to invite those people into your house, kind of know their names a little bit, have a couple of hours of conversation, and then, Robin, as you say, there's a little bit of an arc there where it's not a permanent commitment. You come together for a set of meetings, and then after a little bit of time, you go back to your regular activities, but now you know these neighbors a little bit. And if something were to happen, like somebody fell and you needed some help from a neighbor to get up, and like get your partner up, you could go run next door and ask for help. And I think that's what our friend in Helena thinks is that's a huge benefit, especially when we've got slippery sidewalks in the winter and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I would, I think it's no surprise to anyone that one of the biggest, health threats that we face in the U.S. is loneliness. That people aren't connected to their neighbors like they may have been in the past. And so this is a really good way, I think, because you're talking about something important and you've got actions and you've got these meetings set up and you want to come and meet with people to really connect with your neighbors and get to know them. But like you say, it is an art. It's not a forever thing unless you want it to be. And then that last chapter, the one on what's next, then you can decide, maybe you want to have something that's more permanent.
Yeah, and you don't have that.
Yeah, you don't have it in here.
Yeah, it's in this.
Okay.
I just
Deborah?
Just had a question. Thank you for sharing this. One of the questions that often comes back to us when talking about climate change initiatives at the individual level is, well, individuals really can't make a difference. So, you've got to look at intervening at other levels. So I'm just wondering how you address that. And I know that we've been talking about other benefits, but I think it's really important to be able to also say that individuals can make a difference when we're talking about climate solutions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what makes a difference is all the individuals doing something, ultimately. And so I guess this is, we're starting to scale up and trying to reach lots of people with this program. So it's not, on its own, it's not going to make all that difference. But there is also a financial aspect to this, which I think is important to focus on as well. You're going to be saving money. And I think when people see that you're saving money, maybe they want to do that as well. And so we're kind of hoping that can spread.
Yeah, I'll actually address your comment just slightly. One of the things we saw in Helena was, so I didn't attend the meetings either because it was a different neighborhood. I could have gone. I could have actually, crashed their meetings. But one of the things that was a little bit of a report back from our friend was, when you go to Home Depot, there's like an entire wall of light bulbs, and you go, I really want to be more efficient with my light bulbs, but oh my gosh, I can't figure out which one to buy. One of the things they talked about was, which light bulb do I buy? I have no idea. And they had an active discussion about, when you go, just buy this light bulb. It works in my house and it'll be good for you. And they were able to offer some advice for people who aren't quite as savvy with that whole light bulb discussion. So then you say, just replace 3 or 4 of them in your house and see how it goes. They're not that expensive. It'll be a good thing for you, for people on that block who might not have quite as much in terms of resources. And then they said, well, what other things appeal to you in terms of making small changes or doing things in a more organic way? And they had some suggestions for things that appealed to that community that might not necessarily be available for purchase. So, yeah.
And I guess another benefit, related to your question is that you're starting to build political support for changes, maybe initially in your community.
Yep.
Like in Helena, as they're working forward on a climate action plan, to build support for that as that goes to the city council. And ultimately, perhaps at the state level or beyond as well. So you're absolutely correct that, an individual by themselves aren't going to make a difference, but maybe we can help catalyze something that's a bit broader.
And one of the things also we found was that the sharing of ideas opened people up to other experiences, like you talked about. And in the energy one, one of the assignments is to count all the light bulbs in your house. And I was shocked to find out we have over 100 light bulbs in my house, So now we have a list of the light bulbs that when they go down, we can bring in ones that are more energy efficient, or ones that we have on a lot, we just decided to replace right away. So there's things that in your everyday life you don't think about it, but it's simple little things like the electronics that are plugged in, all the little blinking lights you have throughout your house, they call those vampires. They're taking your energy unnecessarily. Can you make a change? How can you deal with that? Just things that you as a person probably haven't really thought of, and you think you're really sustainable, but there's more. And then just sharing ideas, like with the food chapter, of where you can get local food and where, experiences that people have had and what they're growing and different things. So it's really a networking that you gain a lot from. Even when you think you're really green, you find there's greener pastures.
Can I follow on Deborah's question? I'm really curious if there's a mechanism within either Transition Streets, Transition US, or Transition Network globally. How do the best ideas percolate upward, right? And so I was just thinking, if you have Transition Streets on a budget, are you soon going to have Transition Streets City Hall, right? So you've mentioned, so there could be political buy-in. Yeah. I'm really worried when I look through this. This is skewed very liberal, anti-libertarian. I understand hey, you're going to save money if you switch your light bulb, but then how do you get your city hall to write a code that says the city will only subsidize the installation of PV on those roofs that face the street, right? You don't want to be the last person on your block to put up PV because you're saving so much money, or solar hot water, right? But why would you incentivize the installation of PV panels on roofs that face away from the street? Like, you're not marketing sort of this buy-in. How do you get the best ideas to percolate up and capture those?
Yeah.
Well, some of it's the group, and you begin to change your focus a little. And you can, the program is set up, I think, that you can bring in that neighbor that's a Trump supporter, and you come to respect and have conversations. And I think that's one of the strengths of this, marketing as a way to save money, and not necessarily we're going to make you into a green liberal, but we're going to be neighbors knowing each other. And we're going to take a look at our stuff, and we're going to talk about it a little, and we'll see where we can move forward. And one of the groups, some of the people at the end said, I'm not doing as much as everybody else. And they felt a little funny, but the rest of the group, said, you're moving your narrative in a good direction. So it really depends on that first meeting. That respect for everybody is one of the foundations of this group. And it's in there in the getting together the first time. And so it really is a way to reach across. We're all liberal here, too. We're a mix, and we can do things our way.
And maybe the broader question, how do good ideas come up from local initiatives or local groups to Transition US or Transition Network? In the United States, we have something called the Collaborative Design Council, which is made up of representatives from a number of initiatives, and they meet on, I think, on a monthly basis. You may be interested, Tony, that they just formed a spin-off group called Transition U, which is professors at universities who are getting together and talking about how they can share transition ideas in their communities. And so there is a lot of, it's really non-hierarchical the way we're set up, to some extent, I mean, you have to have some structure, but there is a lot of cycling of ideas, top to bottom.
Just be nice, Reddit has these up votes, down votes.
Yeah.
And how do you, I mean, how do you come up with good ideas? You just gotta have ideas.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting to have sort of, I would think, a transition street filter. These are real people paying real bills, and this is what they love. The buyer's guide to Home Depot's bewildering array of choices.
Yeah, yeah, and it really depends on the group somewhat too. And it does, the neighborhood has a lot of cohesion that they don't realize they have, I think. And, we all go to the same grocery store possibly, or we could go help pick grapes at this one vineyard. And I didn't know about that, but this person did. We did it last year, and that was really fun to help harvest the grapes. So there's community things that are actually locally friendly that everybody could enjoy.
Just to the point this gentleman was saying, is there a sharing out beyond the
So
local?
there is, I was going to ask Dodi, because she's actually done this. There is an evaluation form. Is that just kept internally, or do you send that on to?
We send it on to Transition US too, so they know, they keep a record. But also the other thing we did, which I used there on the poster, we asked people to write their evaluation, and then we can use those to let other people know how they felt. So I don't think I'll go read them, but I encourage you afterwards to go up and read some of the statements from the groups.
Right,
Yeah.
and I was actually curious about, like, the light bulb answer. Is
Oh.
that, like, is there a place, do the solutions that come out of the groups get reported someplace
Where the rest of us should
accessible?
find it.
Yeah. I don't
But some
believe
of
that
it's
there's.
the summary, the average amount that's been saved in homes
Yeah.
and stuff, but
Yeah,
it's
some-
not like a whole database that I know of.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just-
and I should also say this, Transition US staff is very similar in size to Arrow staff. And so,
As a national.
as a national organization, so
Yeah.
I think, we currently have 2 co-directors as well, and a communications person, and that's it. So there's not a lot of capacity there for a lot of that.
You bet, and, I am not even suggesting you do that.
No, I think it's.
In some ways, I think it's actually probably helpful for the community building point of it, that, if I decide to join my group, I commit to doing research, the information is out there, and there's something about we figure it out ourselves rather than we go to a database. So it was really just a general question.
I think that's a really good
And
question.
sometimes people will leave that group when they're done and start another.
Yes.
When you have only 6 or 8 from a neighborhood, that could be a very small part of that neighborhood. There's still a lot more that you might be able to draw in and connect and do the group again. And even doing it more than once, it's not really redundant. You find more things. You get more ideas from the new people in your group, and it's very fluid.
There is going to be a Transition US national gathering in Vermont in June. I can't remember exactly what the dates are. I think early to mid-June. So this may be something that should be discussed there, what the next step is on transition streets.
And there's
You're certainly welcome to attend.
on the Transition US website, there is a lot of little training videos too.
Yeah.
And there is a video about transition streets on the Transition Street website. That's a cute little thing. We have on our website a link to that, so people who go to the Transition Missoula website can see a little cute thing about it and let us know that they might be interested too. It's one other way of reaching out to people.
How is inclusivity promoted?
The first chapter talks about how you're going to run the meeting and builds cohesion, and talks about discussion, rules of discussion, and that's part of it. And then it's just being together 7 times and sharing ideas, I think, too, that and just getting to know people.
I mean, does it encourage to knock on the door, the person who's got the Trump sign, or?
Yeah, it doesn't, well, what is it called? The outreach guide. It doesn't say only go to people that think like you.
Right.
And sometimes you may go to that house and they'll no. But after someone in the group is done, they may go to that house and draw that person in. So it isn't always ta-da, you know. But there is a way of making people feel comfortable with this group if, you know, the people in the group want it to be that way, and that's strongly encouraged. That makes sense. It's, people are people, you know.
Right, no, and I guess on the reverse, is reaching out to the immigrant family that just moved in,
Right.
you know.
I think the expectation is that you'll reach out to your immediate neighbors.
Yeah.
And whoever they may be.
But
I'm not
like
sure
we
in
have
practice how it works.
a local little cafe there in my neighborhood, and so we put up a poster. And so there may be someone a block or two away, you know, who you can get in. And then maybe they can work with their immediate the next time.
This
Yes.
is just a cursory, introduction, like this is a tool to get us back to how most of us probably lived when we were growing up. In the
Yeah.
Midwest, we knew all our neighbors, we shared tools, we shared vegetable produce. We helped each other in our
Yeah.
storms, but now, I don't know several of my neighbors in Billings that lived there 10 years. So it's a tool to take us back to how we used to be as a community, which is it's sad we need it, but it's the reality, so.
Right, and we even found that we learned the names of our neighbors' dogs. It just happens.
Because you came to recognize their stools in your front yard.
No.
So I actually
More
think
like
that'd be.
you walk at the same time, and now you say hi, and now your dog meets their dog. It just happens.
I actually think that'd be a great sort of summative evaluation piece, is just to say, okay, before transition streets, your group of 6 or 8 or whatever, at what frequency would you ask a neighbor for that proverbial 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, which totally, that's why I think you should be knocking on the doors of people who you are not aligned with politically, because it's gonna save you a trip to the grocery store at 10 p.m.
Yeah. And it connects.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things I put on the transition Missoula Facebook page was it was something from another group. I steal all kinds of stuff, and it was go knock on that door and ask for that cup of sugar, because that makes a connection. And that was not a transition produced thing, but it was something in line with transition thinking. Connect, and it's a good thing.
Just because we're in a college town, I wonder how much buy-in have you had from students?
I'm looking forward to going with the transition on a budget program, because so many of them they don't have a home that they own, so we haven't had it from the students as much, but they have a lot of programs there that are somewhat in line. 1,000 Gardens comes to having gardens in homes and yards and that type of thing. So I think it's an untapped resource in some way, but I'm looking forward to transition on a budget and seeing if it's possible to reach out to more students that way. I was trying to think. I can't think of any group right now that's had professors or any teachers in it, but they may have them, I didn't know.
Maybe this transition year.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a pound sign?
No.
Not that I know of.
No. How can we not? No, we really are.
We just have a recent millennial hired on as our outreach director, so I'm sure that
It's coming.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, so resource-wise, there is Transition US Facebook page, so you're welcome to connect there. The website, again,
And
transitionus.org.
And network too, Transition Network, the one out of England, there is a Facebook page.
Yeah.
of share things from that sometimes on our transition Missoula Facebook page.
The word on the street is TikTok, right? Not Facebook?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Old.
I'm sorry.
What is
I'm
TikTok?
too old to understand what you're
yeah,
saying.
no, just like talk to a young person.
Yeah,
Like Facebook is about 50 years old now. So.
yeah, it's aging,
Yeah.
but right now that's phenomenal.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. This is especially for Green. The founder of Transition, Rob Hopkins in England, is a permaculture instructor. So there's a lot of permaculture principles underpinning the organization.
It's lovely.
And if you haven't seen the movie Tomorrow, the documentary, it's called Tomorrow, the documentary. It's not an apocalyptic movie. It does showcase them of Transition Network, and Rob Hopkins is in it. But there's also the book Tomorrow that's written about it that's good too. And the valuation isn't always, well, how did we do as a group? It's also how did we do from when we started in our house in this condition to when we finished in our home with, we found that we could do more than we thought, or we've done this. And also there's parts where, and next I'm gonna try to do this kind of thing. There's a goal setting part of this too. So there's homework on each of them. But, once in a while, someone comes not really prepared. You still can glean stuff from it, as you share.
All right.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you, guys.